Good morning, Catherine. How are you doing today?
Hi, Arrow. I'm fine, and I'm absolutely delighted to be talking to you.
Well, I'm excited to talk with you as well because you're doing something that I've never experienced before. Somebody who speaks openly about the journey that they were on.
Well, thank you very much. I do try to speak openly about it because what's the point otherwise? I want to be able to communicate something, and I hope I've managed to do that. Thank you.
One of the things that you really point to in this is right here is that there's something that's always living in each and every one of us. And it doesn't have to be that one thing where we think we needed to be, but we can grow in other places and become stronger at it.
Wow. I mean, gosh, yeah. You mean that there's something within each of us that carries us through difficulties?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, through the difficulties while exploring newer things where it's almost like, okay, I know I was planted in this position at one time, but now I've been trained to think otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, I think, people can sometimes regard nuns and religion purely in terms of how they appear outwardly through their, religious structures and institutional rituals and things. But yeah, the important thing is what's in your heart and that inner strength and that readiness to keep go on growing and go on journeying and go on evolving, because otherwise, it's not going to be a really spiritual path. It's about growth and it's about becoming the person you're meant to be.
One of the things that I do cherish is silence. You've lived it at a silent monastery. I mean, I can't imagine always consistently being in a moment of now with nothing but silence.
Yeah, it was intensely silent. And that was actually really beautiful. A lot of people find it really puzzling, but there was something very beautiful about a very silent space because you could hear each, the bird song. You could really start noticing things in a way that just gave you a sort of intense sense of presence in the present moment. I think it was a really freeing thing being silent. Of course, we did have to talk a bit. We weren't 100% silent, but the talking was done in a very controlled way and at set times. So there was like half an hour at the end of the day we called recreation, when you could talk to the others. But again, it was all done in a very controlled setting. And the rest of the time, we were meant to be silent unless you were actually, praying.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and even then, I call it stream thinking, and I take a transition walk each and every day. And the reason for that transition walk is to understand the mindsets that we face each and every moment. And it's so incredible to just be silent, because you're right. Everything around us is speaking to us.
Absolutely. I think, the mindfulness movement has sort of tapped into a bit of this, but it was so much bigger than that. There was this real sense of presence in the silence. You weren't just you alone, isolated, all the negative ways of expressing it. Don't do it justice, because there was something positive as well. There was a positive side, which was all that heightened awareness and the sense of a spiritual presence and a relationship with the ultimate, whether for us, it was, of course, God. And it was really rewarding.
One of the things that I've always wondered, only because my essential job is working at a grocery store, because I asked God to put me in a place where there are people, and I thought it was going to be in a church. No, he put me in a grocery store. And I thought to myself, my God, I'm really with the community, because that's what church is. But we do have sisters that come through our store, and I watch people react to them. We don't know how to react to a nun when we see them.
Yeah, you're right. I really noticed after I left, I was in a very cloistered order. So we hardly ever went out. I mean, really, once to the dentist in 12 years. I'm talking about, hardly ever went out. So when I did eventually leave, I was still wearing the habit because I had a few weeks of sort of transitional halfway house time when I was not really fully out or in. People treated me, I was so surprised, people treated me very differently from how I saw them treating other people. Like if you went into a shop or grocery store, people would kind of make way for you, open the door, they might let you go before them in the queue. And this was all very nice. But when I came to take off the habit, I was wearing, jeans, my sister's jeans and, some secondhand clothes or whatever. I probably didn't look very good, but people completely ignore you or much more rude to you. And I found that really disappointing, that, you're kind of put on a bit of a pedestal, and I felt that wasn't right.
Is it really bizarre to step back from such a strong belief in religion and spiritual studies and seeing what's really going on out there in the community? I mean, there's a guy that's running for governor of North Carolina right now that calls feel-good preachers wrong for religion. And it's like, oh no, where are we growing?
Did you say what does he find wrong? Could you just say it again?
He says that feel-good preachers are wrong.
Feel-good preachers?
Yeah, he feels we should go back to the days of, oh my God, fearing.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is just typical. Religion is fraught with controversy, and you get so many different interpretations, don't you? Whether it's kind of the emphasis is all on our fallen nature and needing to repent, or the celebration of beauty of God's creation and needing to rejoice, from one end of the spectrum, from Good Friday to Easter Sunday, there's a whole spectrum, and there are so many takes. And actually, in the end, you've got to realize, I mean, you haven't got to realize, but I had to realize that the human expression of religion is just a part of it. Mm-hmm. And what matters is what's going on inside your own heart and mind and soul and how you live your life. It's a flawed business, religion, but it does point to something that's ultimately really, really valuable and important and even essential for us as human beings.
Surrendering yourself wholly to God. I mean, people say they want to do that. They have done that. But the thing is that when you physically do it, I can't imagine where your heart grows, because to me, it would be swelling with pure love.
Well, yeah, I think that's what I wanted. I feel you probably sound to me like you're quite close to really getting it, because I think when I was attracted to the cloistered life, a lot of people who knew me very surprised and quite shocked, because I was a sort of lively person. I was into music and, choosing this extreme life. But you're right. I think the sense of total dedication and that wholeheartedness and really throwing yourself in without reservation, that does seem to be, it holds out the promise of a life of really, of deep love, as you said, because if you're dedicating yourself to something, you're loving it, aren't you? You're giving your whole self. So for us, there was a sense that if you give your whole self, God gives himself to you, and the end result is joy and happiness and, feel good and fruition. It wasn't meant to be feel good all the time, because there were always meant to be times of trial, and it was also it was a life that was pretty stark and demanding as well. But there was always meant to be some sort of payback in terms of joy and that experience of knowing God's love.
When you talk about those struggles, right away, I'm thinking of my own pastor, Stephen Furtick at Elevation Church, where, he always talks about that, from darkness, from evil comes these great people that God has shaped. And it's almost like I got to go be bad in order to be good. And so it's one of those where it's like, I want to hear about somebody who was good and still is good.
Yeah, well, I know what you mean, because the sort of classic thing is, Mary Magdalene, you come to Jesus with this past, and your sense of shame or repentance propels you into the arms of God in this kind of really wholehearted way. And I felt a bit of that myself, because I'd in my late teens, early 20s, I had drifted away from church. I had boyfriends and been quite out there in my life. So I sensed, I suddenly went really devout and got really into church. But you do meet some people who've always lived very safe lives or very religious lives. And there are a few of them around too. I don't know if they catches up with them later, the sort of shadow side of their personality. I don't know.
I know while I was growing up, church was one of those things that my mother used to say, we don't talk about church. We don't talk about it. And my mother was very religious, but she just always felt like that if we talked about it, we were going to be in judgment. So it took me, way up into my 50s to finally come clean saying, guys, I've always been very, very spiritual. I take me as I am, because this is who I am. How many other hiders are in the world that don't have the confidence to say, I am a believer and I am an activator?
I don't know. I think, there are lots of undercover saints, I suppose.
Yes.
People who don't necessarily go around declaring it in an open way, but are just actually really close to God.
Yeah.
God reaches everyone, if he needs to. Well, if he wants to, which he does, he can reach everybody.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I got it. Boy, you just shared a conversation with you. It's just giving me so many different thoughts. I remember during the lockdown, I kept in my daily writing every day. I would go, God, where are you? God, where are you? And finally in my writing, it said, I'm here. Where are you?
That's brilliant.
That changed me.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. Yeah, that's a great question. It's like Elijah on the mountain, and God says, "What are you doing here?" But yeah, God can speak to us. It's not all one-sided.
I think what's really fascinating and inspiring about your book, and I hope that it touches people just as much as it has me, is that you don't have to wear your spiritual studies, except when you go out into public, you can be you, and it's going to radiate through what your actions, reactions, the way that you speak, the way that you greet. And I think that to me is the greatest traveler.
The greatest traveler. I mean, way of communicating.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's lovely to hear this, because I feel that you've really sort of interpreted religion and for yourself, and come through to seeing, what's important is, what actually communicates itself to others, what actually changes you at a deep level, and what actually matters. And I think so many people confuse a life of dedication to God or a life of faith with the outward trappings of religion. I know, a lot of religious people are very cautious about saying, you don't need the church. Because the church is there for a reason, and that's a very complex, it's evolved in a very complex way. I think there's a lot of good in the church, and of course there's a lot that isn't so good in the church. And I think we need to be really careful about we need to be discerning, and just realize that going to church, going through the motions, and religion itself isn't enough. Our hearts have to be in it, and our hearts have to really want to find God in our lives.
Yeah. Do you find yourself sitting back going, I think we're getting closer and closer to the second coming?
I'm afraid I don't do that. No, I'm not really preoccupied with the second coming as a sort of outward event, objective event.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe I should be. I suppose I interpret it more as kind of, it's all interior for me. It's to do with, it's to do with your own inner life, really. I don't see it necessarily as an external thing, but I perhaps should think more about that.
Yeah. Did you find that writing the book and sitting down with the book, because I mean, you had to have had some silent moments before putting words on a page, but did you find that to be a great way to defrag your life? In other words, to break it down and put things back together?
Absolutely, yes. Again, you've really got it. I found the writing process took years, but I found it absolutely fantastic, because it enabled me, you can write and you can put everything you want on the page. What's ended up between the pages of Cloistered is a fraction of what I wrote. And a lot of what I've written over the years has just been trying to sort out my thoughts about what I've been through, and how I can make sense of it, and what is important for going forward in my life.
Did you use a writing instrument, or did it go into a computer?
Well, my first draft it wasn't even Cloistered. It was a sort of much longer and a much more cathartic, sort of undisciplined kind of draft. Was all done in biro, in notebooks.
Nice.
When I'd only just left, I've got a big box somewhere full of A4 ring binder files, and wrote till my arm was dropping off. Eventually, I learned to use a computer, and now, of course, all my writing is done using Microsoft Word.
In that moment of releasing the thoughts and the experiences, was there ever a moment where you heard in your heart, this is not about Catherine, this is dear future reader? You were writing a love letter to a future reader.
Yeah, I think probably just in the last sort of, once I started honing the draft, probably the first draft wasn't like that, but when I started honing it and working on it and trying to shape it more into something that would be, I think the shaping of it was when I started thinking, how would this read to somebody who didn't know me? And I started writing for the reader rather than just for myself. Or for God or whatever. So that came relatively late, when my awareness of, because I spent years working on my writing. Mm-hmm. So this is not in any way a first draft. It's something that's been through a lot of different takes and a lot of different revisions. And I think after a few years of writing, I started becoming much more aware of how do I reach the reader, and editors helped me with that. And I did, I've done an MA and a PhD in creative writing. So my tutors and editors and people I've learned a lot from others about how to edit and how to shape your work A lot of it's to do with, what you leave out,
Yeah.
knowing what to leave out as well as what to put in.
That can be painful, though, because inside your heart, you're going, oh, this is it. I know this is going to reach people. And then someone says, I would think that one over a little bit more.
I know. I cut loads of things that at the time, it was painful to cut. And you have to kill your darlings, as they say. So I had to sort of, get rid of things, prune things back. And I've kept some of those chapters that didn't make it into the final cut. And I think I might develop those for a future book. And some of it I now realize wasn't necessary for the book, because you don't need to tell people everything, because readers can often sort of work things out for themselves if you tell them just enough.
You said one of my favorite words, pruning. And the reason why that I cherish that word, because when you prune a tree, the energy stays solid. It's your core energy. And so if we prune our lives, we can keep our energy right here as well. So when I hear prune, I'm going, oh, she is a spiritual leader.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. It's a very biblical metaphor as well. So, and that is absolutely true in terms of how plants work too. If we just were allowed to grow unfettered and untrammeled all the time, we would lose a lot of our strength, because we wouldn't be, it would all be dissipated. So, yeah. I think the pruning process is just as important as the sort of self-expression side of it.
One of my very good friends, Joe Lindsley, was over in Ukraine at a monastery when COVID shut everything down. And what he learned in that monastery, to this day, he is still there, and he's helping out the men and women of Ukraine. I love it, the way that God works with people.
That's absolutely amazing. Reminds me of friends of mine from London who went over to Romania. I know I'm going back now to the 90s. And they were co-workers with some missionaries over there. And they ended up getting really involved with it and staying. And Romania's been a big part of their lives. Wow. It's amazing, how people can just, with faith, you can go out into the world and make connections with people and try to bring your best energy to situations to help people.
Wow. Where can people go to find out more about you and share some love?
Well, I don't know about sharing the love. Of course, bring it on. But I don't know. I'm in a sleepy little town on the coast of England at the moment. I normally live in Oxford, just having a few days break by the sea at the moment. But I'm in Oxford. I have a website. It's a pretty basic one that I made myself, all my own work. So I'm not a web designer, but if you can find me on it's catherinecoldstream.com, I think. I also have a Facebook page, author page. And I hope that I'll be writing more and putting more stuff out there soon.
Oh, man, you got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Thank you so much. Well, it's really inspiring to talk to you.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Thank you. I like talking to somebody who sounds like they really, really understood my book and were in some way sort of inspired by it.
Well,
yeah,
I do.
So
I really do. I think it's going to be a big tool for people when they sit down and patiently go through the pages. They're going to learn something, and I hope that they find their own way as well through exploration.
Well, thanks so much, and I'm really glad that you liked it too.
Thank you. Have a great day today.
Have a fantastic day. Bye.